Over the past 500 years, humanity has made a giant leap in understanding the world around us. The universe reveals its secrets, although a great many of them remain unknown. The macrocosm and the microcosm become understandable not only to people of science, but even to ordinary people. But a person has not yet managed to figure out his own brain and its work. Why sometimes the answer is found quickly, and sometimes it is impossible to find it. Although the problems are of comparable complexity, scientists are not able to. It is not yet possible to understand the trick of the brain, despite numerous attempts to figure it out. The highest manifestation of the work of people's minds is the separation of their personality from the world around them. In the simplest version, it sounds like a dialogue. Everyone likes it, but he doesn't like it. I'm not everything. This simple dialogue is enough to understand that a person separates himself from society, realizes his difference from each of its members. However, to say that it is precisely such a consciousness that no academician is able to do. Many famous people tried to give at least a definition of the word consciousness, but everyone got their own formulation. Modern psychology understands consciousness as a reflection of the surrounding reality by the human psyche. At the same time, the historical experience of mankind serves as a link between a particular person with nature and other people. Psychologists believe that consciousness is knowledge that has the following components: the feeling and perception of the surrounding reality, memory, imagination as a factor peculiar exclusively to man, mind. Consciousness is not limited to these factors. Self-awareness allows you to distinguish yourself as a subject of existence and the world around you as an object in which existence takes place. The possibility of self-knowledge and assessment of one's own capabilities for further personal development. The last component of consciousness is considered to be human emotions. The most vivid of them are feelings. If a person begins to unreasonably hate the world around him, the people around him, or a former lover, then there are obvious violations of consciousness. The above concerns the point of view of the materialists. Other schools of philosophy often have their own view on the problem of consciousness, sometimes very different from the view of the materialists and from each other. All schools of psychology agree that consciousness is defined as the process of influencing a person's senses and a person's reaction to information received from the outside, as well as the possible human response to the world around us. Then significant discrepancies begin. Functionalists have taken the path of considering consciousness as an integral biological function of the body. The conclusion obtained as a result of this approach is amazing. According to the proponents of the doctrine, consciousness is nothing more than a fiction, and objectively consciousness does not exist at all. Proponents of Gestalt psychology believe that consciousness is defined as the result of a person's interaction with problems that bother him, but the independent activity of consciousness cannot be explained by such an approach. According to proponents of psychoanalysis, consciousness is generated by the unconscious. The unconscious displaces the opposing conflicts into the realm of the conscious. Cognitive scientists consider consciousness to be an integral part of the process of thinking and the effects associated with it. The problem of consciousness arose before mankind in ancient times, primarily in the mysteries of dreams, frightening states of fainting, and feelings of horror before inexorable death. Disputes still persist around the essence of consciousness and the possibility of its cognition. Some proceed from the recognition of the cognizability of consciousness and even claim that knowledge about the facts of consciousness is the most reliable of all types of human knowledge. Others, on the contrary, categorically deny the possibility of cognition of consciousness, following the example of the German physiologist and philosopher de Bois-Reymond, who argued that understanding consciousness is as futile an attempt as seeing oneself walking down the street from a window. All theories of consciousness tend towards two main poles, the materialistic and idealistic understanding of it. In idealism, the mind is placed somewhere above being. Spiritual life is considered by idealism as the basic and all-encompassing reality, the universal mind, and the sensory world perceived by man as a complex of sensations or a manifestation of the objective spirit. Idealists and theologians defend the idea of the primacy of consciousness in relation to matter, considering consciousness either as a spark of the divine mind or as something arising in the recesses of the human soul. They deny the independence of the existence of the material world and mystify consciousness. Idealists claim that consciousness has nothing to do with the brain. The spirit is completely freed from the outside world and its own body. The spirit is not born, does not arise, does not become. He abides, he lives his own life and in his development generates natural phenomena and directs the movement of world history. According to the ideas of the idealistic trend, which arose in ancient times and has survived to this day, a special, supernatural force acts in the human body. This is the soul, which is the carrier and cause of his thoughts, feelings, desires, In primitive society, it was necessary to explain the phenomena of nature and life. So natural phenomena and objects were perceived as living and animate forces. There was still no clear differentiation of material and spiritual, soul and body. With the emergence of so-called animism, everything begins to be thought of as having a soul in one way or another separated from the thing. The soul or breath, as well as mental and emotional properties, are localized, for example, in Homeric man in some separate organ. Is there mainly mental activity in the diaphragm, emotions in the heart, and the soul in the blood? There is life in the liver. Materialism asserts, the mind cannot be the creator of the world because it itself is a product of the highest form of its organization. Materialism considered consciousness as a cognitive image, as a reflection of the world in the human brain, as an attribute, a function of specially organized matter. If idealism speaks of the abyss between consciousness and the world, then materialism has always sought commonality, unity between the phenomena of consciousness and the objective world, deducing the spiritual from the material, considering being as defining and primary in relation to consciousness. The understanding of consciousness in materialistic philosophy and psychology proceeded in this way from two principles: from the recognition of consciousness as a function of the brain and from the fact that it is a reflection of external influences. There have been many attempts in history to understand the nature of consciousness, and consequently there have been many theories. The proponents of each theory give arguments in favor of one or another of them, but none of them can claim to be universal, covering all sides of this phenomenon. But in each of these theories there are sides inherent in consciousness. Dualism. This is the theory that there are two kinds of substances, consciousness and physical objects. The dualism of soul and body. The point of view according to which consciousness, spirit and matter physical body are two independent, complementary and equal substances. Logical behaviorism. The theory that being in a mental state means being in a behavioral state. That is, either to carry out some behavior, or to have a disposition to such behavior. A two-dimensional theory. The theory that the mental and the physical are two properties of some underlying reality, which in fact is neither mental nor physical. Phenomenological theory. The theory that the main property of human consciousness is intentionality. Emergent theory. The theory that consciousness is a property of some physical object, usually the brain, but it is nevertheless irreducible to the physical states of the latter and is a special non-reducible entity with unique properties. Australian philosopher and lecturer specializing in the philosophy of consciousness David Chalmers spoke. There are two problems, the first of which is simple, and we can solve it. It is to measure some relativity, some indices of consciousness, some of its content. And the second, which is called the difficult problem of consciousness, is a description of research into the measurement of that I, that unique experience that cannot actually be conveyed or told to anyone in words. And it is practically unsolvable. Russian neurophysiologists Ivan Pavlov and Peter Anokhin were among the first to put forward modern territories of consciousness. Pavlov believed that consciousness is associated with activity, with a certain center, a creative part of the cortex, in which there is optimal arousal at the moment, and in which conditioned reflexes are generated and these conditioned effects are differentiated, while the rest of the cortex is engaged in generating unconditioned reflexes, that is, they are just responsible for the unconscious part of our existence. Anokhin, in his theory of functional systems, said that neuronal groups are combined into certain functional systems according to the principle of the function that they should perform. And in this case, Anokhin considered the neurons that are connected by the function of consciousness to be the last layer that separates our material substrate brain from some ideal substrate, our higher mental functions of manifestations of consciousness. He proposed the concept of distributed consciousness. According to this concept, consciousness is a mosaic composed of individual specialized neurons of consciousness that function in accordance with a vector spherical model. American immunologist and neurophysiologist Gerald Edelman describes consciousness in terms of his theory of neurodarwinism. He assumed that neural ensembles exist, function according to the requirements of the environment, that is, they are constantly adapting, constantly evolving, depending on the requirements and conditions. Perhaps at this point in time, some scientist will give an absolute answer to this age-old question: what is consciousness? In the Great Encyclopedic Dictionary, consciousness is defined as the highest form of mental reflection peculiar to a socially developed person and associated with speech, the ideal side of goal-setting activity. The problem of what consciousness is, what is its scope and what is the meaning of the existence of this term, is the subject of research in philosophy of consciousness, psychology, disciplines studying the problems of artificial intelligence,